As the story continues, we learn that the country of Bayezid consists of 3 main cities and 12 villages. The first one is Soara, the city near the sea, which is the trade capital of the country. The second is Varnia, the religious capital, and then there's Shatrama, which is the main capital. It also happens to be the place where our hero Vlad is visiting for the first time. As he enters the magnificent city with the young master, he expresses nothing but awe after seeing just the outside of the city. When travelers finally enter the incredible city, the advanced Night Jaeger informs our boy and Go that henceforth, they'll be the guests brought by Sir Joseph. And then he also warns them to be cautious of their actions, because any foolish thing they do will tarnish the image of the young master. Sir Jaeger also tells them to refrain from turning their heads like country bumpkins, and instructs them to just wait patiently while standing still. Vlad, who's been paying attention the whole time, immediately acknowledges the knight's stern warning and advice while the mercenary just mopes around. The knight then informs them that the servants will bring them snacks shortly, and after saying that, he almost makes another statement. But after hesitating for a while, he changes his mind and tells them not to eat the snacks until he returns, because he fears that the 2 uncultured men would devour the food like savages. Of course, the guests aren't totally comfortable with such an arrangement, so Vlad tries to protest, asking if they could at least have a bit to eat. But before he can even finish talking, Sir Jaeger bluntly tells him to shut up, insisting that they don't touch any of the food. After the knight leaves them alone, the 2 guests decide to give themselves a little tour of the castle, so they start moving around and quickly find themselves in the luxurious waiting room filled with gold. The place is so breathtaking that Goth can't believe his eyes at first. The mercenary finds the incredible place to be beyond his imagination, and even admits that Bayezid is totally different compared to the place where he's from. He makes the confession, and our boy, who's equally astounded by the beauty of the place, agrees with him completely. While the 2 gobsmacked guests are still trying to wrap their heads around the sheer elegance of the room, someone interrupts their experience, claiming that he's never seen them around before. Vlad and Goth turn to look at where the voice is coming from, but all they see at first is a shadow standing behind a curtain. The stranger starts walking towards them, revealing that he was just planning to relax in the room for a while before they came in. He finally steps out from behind the curtains, and the moment Vlad sees the face, he somehow recognizes the stranger but can't remember where he's seen him before. The man stands in front of the guests and plainly asks them who they are, but Vlad is so engrossed in trying to figure out where he saw the face that he didn't even hear the question. He soon realizes that the person's aura is completely different, and it's so strong that it's almost as if he can kill a person with his gaze. Truly, this guy's eyes are practically flaming at this point, and when the terrified mercenary sees this, he nervously introduces himself, stuttering in the process before finally explaining that he accompanied Sir Joseph on his conquest. Before he can ramble about matters that concern nobody else, the unidentified noble cuts him off and confirms his name before moving on to ask our boy who he is. So of course, the blonde-haired kid introduces himself as Vlad of Soara. Hearing this, the noble finds the kid a bit interesting, because he's never heard of him before. But in truth, there's something else that intrigues him. As the stranger takes a close look at Vlad's face, he thinks to himself about how impressive the kid is and notices how his eyes are full of spirit. The most impressive thing he noticed about our boy is the fact that he didn't even flinch when talking to him, which is very strange for him since he has a very scary aura. Overall, he concludes that Joseph has found himself a very useful subordinate. With this in mind, the noble reaches into his pocket and reveals a handful of peanuts to offer to our boy, asking him if he'd like some. Vlad looks at the hand without saying a word at first. After staring at it for a while, he finally reveals that they've been instructed not to eat anything, and upon hearing this, the nobleman is shocked and confused. Seeing his confusion, Vlad gets impatient and blankly explains that they've been told not to eat any food from the place. But while he's saying this, a look of horror appears on Goth's face because he's starting to wonder if Vlad has lost his mind. Dude is shocked to his bones, and quite scared as well because he can't fathom the idea of declining the hospitality of a noble. Meanwhile, the superior nobleman in question just stands there, feeling disappointed and surprised at Vlad's response to his gesture. This little scene ends up confirming that the first thing Vlad of Soara did upon arriving at the Bayezid family estate was to decline the hospitality of Lutger Bayezid, the family's eldest son. Goth literally turns white in embarrassment and fear after our boy's little display, and at the same time, Lutger decides to help himself to the peanuts, admitting that they're tasty. The scene shifts, and the next thing we see is a man writing on a paper, hearing the name Vlad for the first time. It turns out that this man is Joseph's father, who's being informed about the guests that are currently in his home. The focused father doesn't look away from what he's writing, and he then points out how the young master had never brought anyone home aside from Sir Jaeger, who was assigned to him by his mother. Because of this, he suddenly promises to reward Joseph if he succeeds in raising Vlad as a Bayezid family knight. The young master thanks his old man for the offer and bows to him in respect. While he's still in that posture, his father continues talking, and reveals that he's well aware that wielding a blade isn't Joseph's strong suit. But regardless of that, he sternly reminds his son that he's currently inside the Bayezid territory. The young master acknowledges the advice and assures his old man that he won't forget. The father then proceeds to reluctantly ask him about his health, and the son replies that he is fine, earning the pardon to leave the room. As such, he turns around to leave the room and tells his father to take care, but as he walks away, his father watches closely with a very worried look on his face. By the time Joseph is no longer in sight, the man whispers to himself that he better make some tonic for his son. The gray-haired man who's been standing beside him the whole time supports the idea because he thinks that the young master would be very happy with it. On top of that, he also points out that Madame Oksana would be pleased too if she finds out that he made the tonic. Hearing this, Joseph's father comments that Joseph's mother, Madame Oksana, is definitely particular when it comes to her son. But after pondering on the thought for a while, he shakes it off and returns his focus to his work. He then asks the old man, named Ragmus, what he thinks about Joseph's report. Ragmus advises the Lord not to take it lightly, claiming that strange phenomena have been occurring frequently. Hearing this, Lord Bayezid gets angry instantly and insists that they have to find the person behind these supernatural occurrences because he feels that the perpetrator has no right to use sorcery in his land. While Joseph's father is fuming with rage, Ragmus reveals that they've been getting reports from Varnia that suggest that there might be a connection between the undead and the curses. All of these clues either point to the perpetrator being an exceptional wizard or that the supernatural phenomena are the results of two wizards working together. The Lord suggests that it could even be the doing of a group or a secret organization, and Ragmus is inclined to entertain that possibility as well. But regardless of all the clues and theories they've come up with, Lord Bayezid states that they don't change anything. The menacing man finally gets up from his chair and coldly vows that the Bayezid family will continue to reign over the land, eliminating all enemies who stand in their way. With a vigorous mind, the furious Lord instructs that the people responsible for the supernatural phenomena be found at once, including those who dare to inflict harm on his son, and then have the guts to cause chaos in his land. Later that night, we see Joseph finally returning to the waiting room with Sir Jaeger. As you can imagine, the starving guests have been waiting for the young master and the knight to return, so when they see the men at last, their moods are instantly lifted. Joseph admits that his little plans took longer than expected, and politely asks the guests if he made them wait for too long. But Goth, who's so excited to see him, quickly tells the young master that they are fine and that it was not a problem at all. When Joseph calls Goth by his name, the mercenary can't contain his joy because he literally can't wait for what the young master has in store for them. Unfortunately, the joy is short-lived when Joseph suddenly tells him that their rewards will be discussed the following day. Goth realizes that his starving and waiting all day was for nothing, but while he's still being consumed by the feeling of disappointment, the young master tells him that a servant will guide him to his room so he can get some rest. Unable to say a single word in response, the man begrudgingly leaves the room and tells the other three men that he's leaving, probably hoping that they would call him back. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen, and the moment he's out of the room, the remaining men decide to have a chat. Joseph initiates this discussion by sitting in his chair and crossing his legs while fixing his gaze on our hero. He recalls how Vlad saved him and pledged to become his sword, urging our guy to remember it as well. Vlad confirms his vow, so Joseph reminds the blonde kid about something that he should do. He concludes that from the way he understands it, Vlad only wishes to fulfill his duties after getting his freedom. The blonde hero confirms this again, so his master once more reminds him that he pledged to become his sword. The noble son reveals that it makes no sense to him how Vlad would pledge to be his sword, and then wish to have his freedom shortly after. At this point, our boy is starting to understand fully what he's gotten into. Joseph sits cross-legged again, and like a mafia boss, he tells Vlad that he wants to make things very clear to him. He promises Vlad to give him an answer to his request, but only after he reveals the true reason why he's asking for freedom. The two young men engage in a brief staring contest, and after a while, Vlad breaks the silence by asking Joseph if he knows a knight called Godwin, who remembers the blue moon. Hearing this, Joseph realizes that Vlad is nothing close to what he thought he was. The young master initially thought that our blonde hero was just a skilled kid, but now he can't believe what he's discovered, because he could never have imagined that the same kid had such an exceptional background. Joseph suddenly reveals that the unknown person who destroyed the rose's smile is Godwin, the Knight of Gadar. Of course, Vlad knows all too well who he's talking about, because he can never forget the figure of that knight. The images of George's separated head flash across our boy's mind, and his pain is resurfaced when he remembers that Godwin was the one who killed his savior and destroyed the world he knew. Despite all the pain this mysterious knight has caused our blonde hero, for some strange reason, he just can't help but admire him. With this thought in mind, Vlad just stands in front of the young master who's still thinking deeply. Eventually, he decides on his answer and tells Vlad that he can't be of help to him, because unfortunately, the people he seeks are way beyond his power, even though he's a son of the Bayezid family. Regardless, our boy is determined to find a solution, so he bluntly reveals that he's aware that Joseph won't be able to help. In fact, he expected something like this to happen, because Joseph is just the Count's son after all. Even though Vlad is disappointed, he gives the young master some credit for at least being honest about his inability to help. In that case, Vlad decides that making some changes to their contract would be in order. But before he can even say this, Joseph reads his mind and suggests it first. He doesn't even give any time for our boy to process anything, and proposes a 7-year contract to keep him in his service. As you can imagine, our boy is horrified to hear this, because that's actually a pretty long time. And before he can start protesting, the young master claims that he's laid down his pride to even make the proposition, making it very clear in case Vlad wasn't aware before. To make matters worse for our blonde hero, the terrifying advanced knight is staring him down like a leopard tracking its prey. After hearing Joseph's offer, our boy thinks about it and admits that even though he isn't sure, it somehow seems like the noble is telling the truth. Still sitting comfy in his chair, the Count's son assures Vlad that he would have a promising future, reminding him that he's his savior. Joseph starts to make the offer a lot more enticing when he explains that for the next 7 years, he would feed, clothe, and even train the blonde kid if he accepts the contract. On top of that, the young master claims that he intends to make the country bumpkin into an outstanding knight, who would never lose to anyone in combat. It was pretty obvious earlier that Vlad didn't like the contract, especially because of the lengthy duration. But the moment he hears the noble say that he would make him a proper knight, his eyes widen with great interest and a sprinkle of disbelief. While our boy is still in a state of shock, Joseph continues to break down the terms of the contract, hoping to entice him even more. He claims that the poor kid from Saga can enjoy all of these benefits, if only he would just remain loyal, and perform only the tasks he's allowed or instructed to handle. Joseph then goes on to state that the issue with Godwin goes without saying. But even though he won't be able to help with that, he reveals that he shall allow him to interfere in any matters that concern his former city. After that, the young master informs Vlad that the girl named Gemina appears to be currently staying in the monastery, and as you'd expect, the kid is shocked to hear that the Count's son knows about his friend. After breaking the news to our hero, Joseph asks him what he hopes to achieve by returning with a sword in his grasp, pointing out that the sword isn't the only sharp thing in the world. This noble soon embarks on what could be called a shocking spree, because at this point, he's just dropping bombshells back to back. Joseph reveals that he too has a weapon of his own as well, and this leaves Vlad dumbfounded once again. So, after placing all his cards on the table, the Count's son finally asks our blonde hero what his answer is. The scene shifts to a while later, and we see Joseph staring at his reflection as he admits that Vlad has an impressive goal. But while he feels his method was okay, Sir Jaeger points out that the young master seemed too desperate, and asks him if he really needed to act that way. The loyal knight goes on to state that he can always find a useful kid for his lord, and Joseph replies that he's aware, since talent can be found all over the world. However, the young master reveals that the ability to awaken their talent is a completely different matter, and that's exactly what's keeping him so hooked on our hero. Although he feels that Vlad is the perfect candidate for him, Sir Jaeger still tries to change his mind, asking him if he's sure that the blonde kid would simply agree. The young master continues to stare at his reflection for a little while longer, before finally breaking the silence and confirming that he believes Vlad would be perfect for him. The reason for this strong conviction is that Joseph saw it with his own eyes, back when our boy slashed the cursed woman during the expedition. The loyal knight doesn't give up in his attempt to dissuade his master, and then tries another angle by reminding Joseph that Vlad is irrational and rebellious, which would make him difficult to control in the future. Seeing the knight's constant attempts to change his mind, the Count's son decides to flatter him a bit, telling him that training Vlad won't be so hard since there's another advanced knight who's fit for the job. Joseph reminds his loyal subject that 7 years is a significant amount of time, and believes that it should be more than enough to put a leash on Vlad's neck and make him obedient. The nobleman's plan works like a charm, because in the blink of an eye, Jaeger accepts the responsibility of training the heady kid. And even though he's not too excited about it, he assures his master that he'll do his best to make Vlad do their bidding without stress. Hearing this, the young master is pleased, and he motivates the knight even more by suggesting that the more challenging the kid is to manage, the more rewarding the outcome will be. At this point, it's clear that this nobleman is obsessed with our hero, because even after concluding things with Jaeger, he goes back to praising the blonde kid. The man looks at his reflection again, and talks about how he thought Vlad was a useful wolf at first, but now he's also someone who chases after the moon. By the next morning, we see Jaeger taking Vlad to his new room and helping him settle down. The knight admits that it's a bit shabby, but assures the kid that he has the room all to himself. Vlad makes it obvious that he comes from the slums when he exclaims, because he thinks the room looks amazing. To him, this supposedly shabby-looking room is perfect because it doesn't have dirt on the floor, and on top of that, there's even a bed. It's practically a palace in his opinion, and as the knight hears him say all of this, he quickly remembers that the kid is actually from the Alice. He's not used to such behavior because their trainees usually come from affluent backgrounds, which makes them struggle to adapt in the training grounds. With all that has happened in that short while, Jaeger suggests that Vlad won't have any issues settling, unless he decides to cause any trouble. The kid already knows that the knight is referring to the peanut incident with Sir Lutcher, so when he starts judging Jaeger with his eyes, the latter shifts the blame back, claiming that he didn't even expect Vlad to obey him since he listened to him before. The little combo is cut short when Jaeger suddenly leaves, but not before telling our boy to meet him at the military exercise hall after he's done eating, because they'll start their sparring sessions together. Just when the knight is about to leave, a lady calls out to him, calling him her loyal knight. For someone who's always brooding and stern, Jaeger gets incredibly flustered just by hearing Lady Oksana's voice. The nervous knight quietly informs Vlad that she's Joseph's mother, and then urges him to pay his respects the way he was taught earlier. Thankfully, our boy doesn't mess it up, since he just imitates the senior knight as he greets the lady. The noblewoman greets them back, and asks if Vlad is the child she's heard about. Jaeger confirms it, claiming that Sir Joseph took him in personally. Hearing this, Lady Oksana looks at our boy intensely with her bright yellow eyes, and it makes him so uncomfortable that he starts blushing for everyone to see. After her little trick works its charm, she thanks him for saving her son, and the flustered kid stutters as he tells her that he was only doing his job. I guess even the heroes can't resist the charm of a MILF. Regardless, she promises to bestow a reward upon him, because he's achieved something much greater than he realizes. With his cheeks still bright red, he bows before her in thanks, before she suddenly rubs his head to compliment the color of his hair and his eyes. Like most mothers, she begins to talk subtly about his appearance, suggesting ways to make him look better, before eventually promising to arrange clothes for him. At this point, our boy is so overwhelmed by her affection and calming aura that he's literally struggling to hide how much blush can show on his face. Thankfully, the motherly woman leaves them at last, telling Jaeger to keep up the good work. After she's gone with her maids, the two guys catch their breath, and the knight asks Vlad why he was so restless. The kid responds that he's never met a noble woman before, and Jaeger comments that he did well for his first time. After all, Lady Oksana has a knack for making people lose their edge. After the little chat, he excused our hero to go and have his meal. The scene then shifts to the dining hall, and there we see a bully spitting into our hero's soup while his minions cheer him on. The troublemaker insults him with the gesture, before proceeding to claim that he mistook Vlad for a trash can because he smells like garbage. Rather than giving them the reaction they want, the blonde kid skillfully scoops out the spit and throws it away before continuing his meal while thinking about how they're acting up even faster than he expected. The bully and his gang are enraged and confused by his calmness, but while they're pondering on what next to do, our boy remembers Jaeger's warning not to tarnish Joseph's image. So, he tries to think of a way to deal with them without getting the Count's son involved. The ringleader leaves in a huff and calls our hero a bastard, telling him to get ready for a hazing soon. But before he can exit the area, our boy suddenly asks him what his name is. The bully is shocked to hear this, so Vlad repeats the question. This time, sending chills down the guy's spine with the murderous intent laced all over his face. The troublemaker is instantly terrified, so he stammers a bit as he reveals that his name is Sobanin. Vlad then repeats the name, claiming that he'll remember it, also making it sound as if he had marked him for death. I honestly didn't expect this development, but it looks like our hero has stepped on a path to become a noble. I'm sure he'll get a lot of scorn and resistance on his journey, but I can't wait to see how he proves his worth to the Bayezid family. Time later, we see the family head taking a stroll outside with his right-hand man. They get to a point where they see people training below, so the noble suggests that they stay and watch for a bit, to which his trusty assistant completely agrees. Looking down at the training ground, the family man sees something that catches his attention, and it turns out that it's none other than our favorite blonde-haired swordsman. The old noble asks if he's the kid that Joseph brought, recalling that he heard the boy was blonde. He keeps staring at our hero, and even admits he's pretty good-looking, but he's suddenly interrupted when his assistant calls his attention to something else. It turns out that someone standing on the other far side is watching the training session in secret. However, this peeper isn't just any stranger because they quickly recognize him as the advanced knight, Jaeger. Apparently, he's a bit anxious to see how the blonde swordsman under his care would perform during his first training session. The king totally understands this, but he's also quite eager to see just how skilled this new guy actually is. Soon enough, an intense sparring session begins, and we see our boy clashing wooden swords with the other knight in training. With a cold and emotionless demeanor, he swings his sword over and over at the opponent, forcing him back with each strike and giving him a terribly hard time. His opponent groans as he's forced to defend himself without any breaks, and it makes the spectators wonder how such a young kid can be so fierce in combat. Vlad's bright blue eyes lock in on his target, as he unleashes an onslaught of sword strikes which shouldn't even be that easy, seeing that his opponent is much taller than him. Despite how impressive his technique looks, the family head just states that our boy is sloppy, which comes as a surprise to the old man standing beside him, who already feels that he's amazing. He asks the king if he really thinks that, so the latter says that something does shine through. The family head feels that it's praiseworthy, because even though Vlad is clumsy, he's still trying his best to use what he has learned. While he's saying this, we catch a glimpse of his scarred fingers and knuckles, suggesting that they were probably acquired from years of training with the sword. Meanwhile, Vlad continues to dominate his opponent on the training ground, and at the same time, he urges himself to always keep in mind that all swordsmanship starts from his footing. The location of his feet plays a very vital role in sword combat, because it turns out that if he's able to deceive his opponents with his shoulders and his gaze, then he can control the opponent with his movements. Our boy uses all of these skills accurately by first controlling the location of his feet, dropping his shoulders, and tricking the opponent with body movements. At the same time, he keeps his blue gaze locked in on the guy, and our boy uses all of these tricks to lure his opponent in. Sure enough, his plan works, and the guy tries to land a powerful down slash on him, but Vlad skillfully dodges by jumping backward. His black-haired opponent is exhausted and frustrated after missing what looked like the perfect chance. But before he can catch his breath or recover from his mistake, Vlad comes in hard with a power-packed counterattack. The kid lands a devastating hit on the black-haired guy's side, and the force is so much that he screams in agony. You can't blame him though, because that hit looks like it probably damaged some of his internal organs. After literally incapacitating him, Vlad grabs him by the hair and identifies him in one of Savanen's henchmen. Now, it becomes a lot clearer why our boy was fighting like he had a personal vendetta against him. Vlad drags him by his hair and balls his fist like he's about to punch him into the future. The blonde kid reminds the guy how he enjoyed laughing at him earlier in the cafeteria, and then dares him to try snickering a bit more now. Bro's eyes are glowing with power and rage at this point, and after making his point, he lands a killer punch on the henchman's face. The single blow breaks his nose and leaves blood all over his face. This terrifying sight leaves the other students in a state of shock as they watch on in horror. While the pummeling goes on below, the king's right hand is equally concerned because he doesn't feel that they should just let Vlad beat the shit out of the other guy. However, the family head doesn't seem bothered by this, so he simply tells the old man to let them be, pointing out that to become a knight, such a level of spirit is required. Besides, he says that Sir Yeager seems to be enjoying the beatdown, and his right-hand man agrees when he sees the advanced knight watching with so much concentration. As Vlad continues to reshape his opponent's face with his fist, one of the other students finally has enough of it, so he yells at the new guy to stop hitting him. However, the blonde swordsman just ignores him, which he doesn't take lightly. He starts yelling even more, trying to intimidate him, but Vlad only stops when he's satisfied with the bloody facial reconstruction he's done. With blood stains on his face, he coldly apologizes to the others, admitting that he got too engrossed. But they're instead more concerned about his terrifying gaze, which they don't understand. After beating the other guy into a coma, he turns around and walks away, but before he leaves, he makes sure to taunt Savanen, asking him to apologize to the henchman on his behalf because he can't get back to his senses when he's too engrossed. Savanen gets furious and almost curses at him, but before he can do so, Vlad cuts him off. The blonde swordsman suddenly starts walking towards him, saying that he would also like to apologize in advance, telling him that in Sabanen's case, the beating won't just stop where it did today. After staring the troublemaker down, he starts walking away, but before he leaves, he promises to call Savanen to come spit in his soup again if it turns out to be too bland. Vlad walks away after dropping such a cold line, leaving Savanen very uncomfortable because he now knows what a crazy bastard the newcomer can be. At this point, he's convinced that Master Joseph brought in a mad dog from the back alleys, but Vlad just smiles back at him like a psychopath, proving his point even further. The scene shifts, and we see a cleaned-up Goth looking sharper than ever while enjoying this meal. At the table, he suddenly asks Vlad if he's really been beating up other vassals, saying that it's a rumor spreading like wildfire among the servants. The swordsman just evades the question by asking Goth about his work as a stable hand, and how difficult it is. The mercenary immediately hops on the topic, saying that he's no ordinary stable hand, because now he works for the great Count Bayezid. Goth is about to start bragging about the experience and all that, but then he suddenly realizes that Vlad managed to distract him from the important discussion at hand. He then reveals that he heard Vlad beat the crap out of guys all over the manor, and reminds the blonde swordsman that it's a crime. Vlad does not seem bothered in the slightest, and he just asks Goth why he's so surprised. The blonde kid reminds Goth that he has always been a criminal, and says that simple assault is going easy on them. Hearing this, Goth is stunned, but he just listens to what he has left to say. Vlad continues to try to justify his actions, claiming that he didn't even hit the guys in an obvious way, and points out that they were the ones who picked a fight with him earlier. Goth still doesn't understand how Vlad can think what he did is okay, but the swordsman argues that it is, saying that now no one talks to him needlessly anymore, which he believes is a good thing. Just then, another student walks in with a tray of food in hand, and introduces himself as Portly Canner. An impatient Vlad turns around, and bluntly asks him what business he has with him. Hearing Vlad's rather unfriendly response, he becomes nervous and starts shaking in fear, so the blonde swordsman tells him to either sit at the table with them or get lost. The moment Vlad says this, Portly's entire mood brightens up in excitement, because he never imagined that he would get invited to sit beside the blonde swordsman. He quickly joins them at the table, thanking Vlad for inviting him, but the latter just sighs in exhaustion because he actually just wanted the guy to get lost instead. Portly is so excited to sit there that he begins telling the story of how he's been eating alone, in places like the bathroom. As you can imagine, Vlad is grossed out by this, so he reminds the fat kid that he's eating his precious sausage. Portly sees the food and asks Vlad if it's delicious, before revealing that his father is the one who supplies the manor. The fat boy claims that his Canner family supplies all the meat in the manor, revealing that his family has been in the business of livestock and cattle farming for generations. After telling Vlad all of this, Portly remembers that he saw the hero asking for more sausage earlier, so he offers him some of his own to the new guy. Of course, our boy is suspicious of all of this politeness and kindness, so he snaps at him, asking what he's going on about. Our boy tries to pretend like he's not moved by the mouth-watering offer, but when the scene changes, we see him standing in a heaven of sausages. Turns out that it's Portly's huge stash, which his father sent for him to eat. However, he claims that it's too much for him, so he wants to share. Seeing and hearing all of this, Vlad realizes that all of the vassals in the manor are young masters from great families. The hero actually forgot for a while that these were people he could have never even talked to if he was still in the back alley. With this in mind, he decides that it would be a good idea to build at least one good connection now that he's in such a place. So, out of the blue, he asks Portly if he would like to eat together with them henceforth, and the fat kid gets so excited about it. He accepts the offer, and Vlad confirms that he's okay with the arrangement. The blonde kid then says that all vassals have to get along. And even though it looks like he's befriending Portly for the sake of sausages, we learn that it's not necessarily the case. The scene changes again, and we see the green-eyed advanced knight walking down a big hall. He seems a bit exhausted, probably because serving the young master and literally raising a whole human being is not an easy task for anybody. The stress seems to be piling up for him, and he knows that the only time he'll be able to catch his breath is when his men, Cade and Maxim, recover from their injuries. His trail of thought is interrupted when a big knight with a fat beard approaches him. The guy asks Jaeger where he's off to in such a hurry, and that's when the eye-patched knight turns around to identify him as Sir Gregory. Seeing his fellow knight, he curses at the back of his mind, because he probably didn't want to talk with him. Although he tries to hide his displeasure about the encounter, Sir Gregory spots it in an instant, and laughs about it before accusing him of being too obvious when he's upset. At this point, Jaeger bluntly tells him that he's clearly busy at the moment, and the amused knight just laughs again, telling him that he's not surprised about it. He says that the advanced knight must be indeed very busy since he's the one who handles all of Joseph's duties by himself. Not surprisingly, Jaeger gets tired of the conversation very quickly, so he asks Gregory to cut to the chase, asking if there's something he wants to say. The brown-haired knight keeps smiling like a kid who just received a lollipop, and then reveals that he's come to suggest that a knight like Jaeger should be raising a vassal. Gregory adds that it's not too late for him to do that yet, but the uninterested advanced knight hits back at him, suggesting that he just focuses on raising his own vassal properly. Even though he doesn't really care about anything the jester usually says, he can't help but wonder why he's suddenly talking about vassals out of the blue. The fat knight reveals that his vassal is Portly, and claims that he's already all grown up, but also admits that he needs to lose some weight. Gregory says this, and then bursts into unnecessary laughter once more, so Jaeger reluctantly asks him to explain what exactly he's trying to say. Rather than quickly making his point, he decides to beat about the bush some more, saying that Vlad seemed pretty good to him. He showers praises on the blonde kid, stating that he's manly in character and confident in his spirit, but Jaeger is getting frustrated by the prolonged small talk. Exasperated, he reminds Gregory that he's very busy, before asking him once more what exactly his point is. The fat guy just keeps laughing while talking, and then he tells Jaeger that knights meddling in vassals' affairs isn't quite fitting, claiming that it could lead to embarrassment. Regardless, Gregory reveals that Vlad seems to be warming up to Portly lately, but Jaeger doesn't believe this, because he knows that the blonde swordsman doesn't have any friends, and on top of that, he believes that Vlad thinks he's better than everyone else. Despite Jaeger's opinion, Gregory just requests that he tell Vlad to hang out with Portly. The fat knight reveals that the chubby kid is his cousin's nephew, which means that he wouldn't like for him to get beat up in the manor. After making this personal request to Jaeger, he tells him that he's the only one who can influence Vlad's behavior, but the advanced knight doesn't look like he's going to help for free. Jaeger wants to know what he'll be getting in return, so the ever-smiling knight tells him that he can also ask him for a favor in the future. He beats his chest, implying that he would help on his honor as a knight, but that's when Jaeger tells him that Vlad doesn't really listen to him. Hearing this, Gregory exclaims, claiming that such a character is what is going to make our boy go places. Meanwhile, at the Bayezid family stable, we see a brown horse chilling while the stable hand assures Vlad that he's not the problem. Goth explains to his captain that he won't even be able to get on a horse, even though they're all properly trained. He says that the horses don't usually shy away from people, but wonders why they just freak out whenever Vlad approaches them. Goth says that it's a matter separate from skill, and goes on to reveal that even the other stable hands have complained about the issue. Hearing all of this, Vlad curses in frustration, and he feels like this is how it's always been for him. Right from when he was younger, animals always hated him. Cats and dogs would freak out and run away whenever he went near them, and he has a feeling that it's the same problem he's having with the horses. As he thinks deeply about this, he suddenly remembers that he rode Jaeger's horse that day during the expedition. He reminds Goth of the night they fled the undead, but then he admits that he was at the back while Goth did most of the riding. The mercenary quickly informs him that the advanced knight's horse is very expensive, and Vlad is disappointed when he hears this, because he feels like it would sound stupid if he said he could only ride expensive horses. He begins to get frustrated at this point, recalling how Jaeger insisted he learn horse riding at all costs. While the two are brooding over the failure, someone suddenly walks into the room. It turns out to be a maid sent by Lady Oksana who has summoned Vlad. The blonde kid is beyond surprised to hear that she has called for him, and as the scene changes to a very expensive room, we see the green-haired noblewoman talking with our boy. She says that she wouldn't have imagined he grew up in the back alleys because of how he looks now. It turns out that he's wearing a very amazing outfit for a nobleman, and Lady Oksana feels that it suits him very well. The woman tells the clothmaker not to fit it too much since he's 17 years of age and still growing. She then says that Joseph grew a lot as well when he was Vlad's age, and she also promises to get him other clothes when summer comes. After all, clothes fitting of the season are a must for one to maintain physical performance. Vlad's cheeks turn bright red by the time she's done talking, and all he can do in response is to bow his head and thank her genuinely. However, she waves his thanks off and reminds him that she should be the one thanking him because he saved her son's life. The insanely polite lady then apologizes for calling him when he was probably busy training, and then she gives him permission to leave. Hearing this, Vlad thanks her once again and exits the room. Once he's outside, he sighs in relief, feeling that the lady is just difficult to be around for no particular reason. Taking a look at his new outfit, he starts to wonder how much it's worth. It is so comfortable that it doesn't even feel like it belongs to him. But then he looks at his old clothes in his hand and remembers that they weren't even his in the first place. He walks down the hallway and thinks about how he shouldn't get used to this new life. Vlad begins to feel out of place because even after he tries so hard to get to the Bayezid family, he still feels like he doesn't belong there. The blonde hero even feels like he's gaining weight, and it's like flesh clinging onto his soul. His episode of self-pity is interrupted when he looks out the window and sees something that catches his attention. Vlad is taken aback when he sees Savanin beating one of the other vassals to a pulp. He beats the guy, while calling him a pig and asking him if he forgot what it felt like to get bullied. Savanin seems very furious that the kid started having fun, just because they allowed him to live quietly. It's at this point that we learn that the poor kid on the receiving end of this brutality is Portly. Savanin keeps beating him up, asking him if he likes his new best friend, and as he says this, he just gets even more enraged, claiming that they're a flock of filthy fuckers. Vlad watches on from the high window and concludes that people are truly the same everywhere. He feels that there will always be those having the time of their lives, and those who just can't live in peace. In the end, Vlad feels that they're just rascals who prey on those weaker than them. Feeling very pissed off, he decides that he'll have to wear his old clothes again, at least for just the day. Later that night, he knocks on a door, and when the person inside answers the door, we see that it's Portly. Our boy is speechless when he sees the poor kid's messed up face, and when Portly asks him what he's doing at his door so late at night, he says that he needs something from him. The chubby vassal is surprised and confused when he hears this, but Vlad simply looks inside the room and points at the biggest piece of meat in there, asking Portly to give it to him. The kid is reluctant to let go of this piece because he cherishes the ham too, but Vlad insists. Portly agrees to give it to him, but he feels bad because he thought that they would at least smile while greeting each other. Since that's not the case in their relationship, Portly starts to believe that Vlad just wants to leech off him. Even though it's a harsh and heartbreaking thing to accept, the kid ultimately decides that it's still better than eating alone. Portly brings down the fat piece of ham and offers it to our boy, so Vlad tells him not to think of it as an unfair deal, saying that he is taking a fair price. The injured kid doesn't seem to understand what he's talking about, so Vlad tells him that a knight he knows said something like this once. Our boy goes quiet, and he starts to remember the man who said this to him. He recalls that the knight was a man who only takes the price that is rightfully his. And as he thinks about this, the scene slowly changes from the front of Portly's room to where Vlad is standing menacingly with a wooden sword. He's currently standing in front of the other vassals, who have also armed themselves with their sparring weapons. For some weird reason, they're not even scared at all, and they look so confident, as if they can easily defeat our blonde-haired swordsman. Unfortunately, they're not even nearly as confident as Vlad. With an unfazed look in his eyes, he examines the opposition and confirms that he's going up against 14 of them all by himself. Our boy admits that even the thugs in the back alleys didn't go this far to defeat him, but the moment he says this, the ringleader of his opponents angrily tells him to shut his mouth. Savanin is so enraged that a vein is bulging out of his forehead when he's talking. He points at the blonde swordsman and challenges him once again, revealing to him that he wants to see how long Vlad can keep up his unwavering spirit. As you'd expect, the fearless hero accepts the challenge without hesitation and gestures for them to come at him and encourages them to do it quickly. In response to Savanin's threats, he reveals that he quietly came all the way out there just because of him, and so he tells him that he expects the same kind of commitment from him. This only makes the bully so much more furious. He grits his teeth in rage, as a very serious scowl stays on his face, and with this kind of anger to fuel him, he shouts for his henchmen to attack Vlad so that they can crush him. Sure enough, they all charge at our boy with their wooden swords, and as they finally come at him, he says to himself that he's glad he changed back to his old clothes, because he's sure that blood is going to splatter tonight. As we resume the story, the first thing we see is the blonde-haired swordsman beating the shit out of the bullies. They all surround our boy, hoping to defeat him, but he just tears through them like they're not even there. Savanin stands behind and yells at his lackeys to fight harder. He tells them not to back off, and instructs them to block Vlad from every side. But all this screaming ends in futility because our boy is just way too strong for them. Seeing just how unstoppable the blonde guy is, Savanin is horrified. He feels that the guy is completely different from the last time they sparred, and he's utterly confused because, as far as he knows, Vlad barely wielded a sword 2 months ago. Even though the current situation makes no sense to him, Savanin urges his boys not to back down from the fight, and threatens to kill anyone who retreats. While he's still making this threat and screaming at the top of his lungs, our boy suddenly advances toward him. Vlad is pissed off to hear the threats, and asks Savanin if he's ever even killed anyone before. Of course, the bully is enraged when he hears the taunts, so he furiously swings his wooden sword in an attempt to shut Vlad up for good. As you can imagine, the blonde-haired swordsman is way faster than him, so he skillfully dodges the attack, and goes in for a counterattack. Before landing the hit, he remembers how he was dealing single blows with all his might during the expedition, and he intends to recreate those attacks now. Vlad strikes at Savanin, but the bully manages to block the attack. However, the onslaught is far from over, because our blonde hero plans to finally make the result of Jaeger's training become very evident. The voice in his head suddenly comes back, and it encourages Vlad to keep trapping his opponent in the gap he's creating. Sure enough, the guy doesn't give Savanin any breathing space. Our boy lands blow after blow on the bully, and with every single hit, all the guy can do is curse and swear at the swordsman. Seeing the progress, Vlad starts to finally understand this technique, so he decides to utilize the gap and space to create a flow of his own. Using this fighting style, it doesn't take long before he knocks Savanin to the ground. The troublemaker groans in pain as he falls on his back and cries about his injured leg. Unfortunately, before he can even finish making the complaint, he looks up and sees the ferocious blonde kid holding a wooden sword to his face. With Vlad's hand up in the air, the guy concludes that he's done for, so tears start to roll down his face as he accepts his fate. However, just when it looks like our boy just murdered Savanin with a wooden sword to the head, we and all the other bullies quickly realize that it's not the case. Rather than unceremoniously ending the guy's life, Vlad decides to show mercy, so he buries the sword mere centimeters beside Savanin's head. With the bully shivering like a wet bird, the blonde swordsman stares him down with murderous blue eyes and warns him to never look him in the eye again. He also takes the chance to tell him never to mess with the fat kid again, and hearing this, all Savanin can do is just nod frantically with a terrified look in his eyes when he realizes how serious Vlad is. Our boy looks down at the bully and is a bit surprised that the guy actually tried to kill him. Either way, he believes that what he's done so far is enough to pay back for jammin', so he turns around to the minions and asks them who would like to fight him next. With murderous intent laced all over his face, he tells them that they have to finish what they started, but the lackeys no longer seem to be interested in fighting. Now, they all look like they'd much rather be anywhere else in the world. Unfortunately for them, Vlad is dead serious about resuming the fight, so he tells them that he's going to attack if they don't come at him. He doesn't charge at them like a raging bull. Instead, he struts down like a confident lion, ready to devour its prey. With every step he takes, these guys get even more terrified. But as afraid as they are, none of them have the balls to even think of running away. They all just stand there shivering in fear until they meet the unsavory fate that Vlad metes out on them. Our boy teaches them a lesson and makes sure to leave some very lasting marks too. As blood splatters all over the place, Count Bayezid looks outside the window to watch it, and he's very impressed by the outstanding display in swordsmanship. Some days after that, we see that the Bayezid family is hosting the regular monthly meeting of the knights. This meeting takes place in the throne room, and by some weird coincidence, the knights who support Rugiger and those who support Joseph stand on opposite sides of the room, with some very obvious frowns etched on the faces of the former. As divided as they may seem, there are also those who are neutral. Just then, they're informed that the duty schedule has been reorganized to prepare for the absence of Rudiger and his knights who will soon leave on a mission. This is announced by the Knights Order Captain Anatolis. He reveals that the next agenda for the meeting is the distribution of the holy items sent by the church, and while he's still talking, the Count gets distracted. He thinks how the atmosphere has completely changed today, and notices how Rudiger's knights look like they're about to rip the others apart any moment now. On the other hand, he notices how Joseph's supporters seem more relaxed, and honestly, he can't blame them, because they have cause to be happy. After all, it's no longer a surprise that knights on Joseph's side were the ones dispirited all this while. With this in mind, he mindlessly stares at Jaeger and smiles. Of course, the advanced knight senses that someone is looking, so he sneaks glances at the Count and starts to wonder why he's smiling. Not long after that, the regular meeting is brought to a close, so Captain Anatolis suggests that all the knights take another look at their duties. As the swordsmen start to exit the room, one of them starts to take jabs at Jaeger. He claims that the Bayezid family has brought in a rabid dog who doesn't even know who he should bite, and then he makes a comment about why backgrounds should be prioritized in such matters. The green-eyed swordsman takes offense and turns around to look at Rudiger's knights, but they show no sign of fear and instead scowl back at him. One of them just hisses and suggests that they leave instead of confronting the advanced knight, while another one finally confirms that the new ferocious knight in training is under Jaeger. As they walk away, one of the neutral knights approaches Jaeger and jokes about how the others are boiling with rage. The green-eyed knight turns around and asks Sir Gregory what he's talking about, but the comedian just tells him to stop acting innocent when the word is already out. Seeing that Jaeger is still confused, Sir Gregory finally reveals that he heard Vlad has performed a huge exorcism. He claims that the drill instructor couldn't even handle the blonde kid, because he's beyond the standard. As you can imagine, Jaeger wasn't aware of this before, and hearing it now, he remembers just how much of a pain in the butt Vlad can be. After breaking the news to him, Sir Gregory once again offers his services, claiming that he can help with any task, and that he doesn't mind if it's difficult or tiring. Hearing this, Jaeger just starts walking away, stating that he'll keep the offer in mind. When the advanced knight is by himself again, he quietly thinks about how Vlad made him proud. He's not too surprised though, and even feels that this is the least the kid should do, especially since he was the one that taught him after all. The scene changes, and we see a brand new armor set being unveiled. Apparently, it's a gift that the Count sent for Vlad, and Jaeger is a bit surprised to hear that the Count would personally do that. He almost doesn't believe it, and even the other knight believes that it's too nice a gift for a mere vassal. As they all stare at the beautiful armor, Sir Jaeger realizes that it's made of orc leather and grey orc at that, to which Sir Joseph confirms. The grey orcs can only be found in the north, so any armor made of grey orc leather basically means that it belongs to a northern warrior. After seeing such a rare gift being given to the blonde kid, Joseph concludes that his father must have already taken a liking to Vlad. He believes that the kid must have already done something to prove himself as a person worthy of such an investment. After all, he did manage to get the great Count Bayezid's approval in just a month. Hearing this, Jaeger agrees with the young master, claiming that, at the very least, there's not even any vassal around who can rival the blonde kid. Sir Joseph responds, admitting that he has also heard about that, and reveals that the rumors are already widespread. Regardless of Vlad's incredible success in such a short while, the young master reminds his knights that they can't sit idly. He suddenly pulls out an envelope with a red seal on it, and when Jaeger asks him what it is, he vaguely states that it's the next step. After breaking the seal, the advanced knight opens the paper to read its contents, only to find out that it's no ordinary invitation. Joseph then asks his trusty knight if he can respond to it. Of course, Jaeger is more than happy to do this for his young master. Besides, he also happens to have been pent up, cleaning after the kid lately. Hearing this, Joseph is delighted, so he confirms that everything has been concluded, and decides that they will be going to a place called Dermer. The scene quickly changes to a sunny field, and we see a horse-driven cart passing by. Inside the moving cart, we see the young master Joseph sitting across from our boy, Vlad. The nobleman seems excited about the journey and decides to give the young swordsman a little lesson. Joseph reveals that Dermer is famous for its lemons and says that it's a city that they should be grateful for, and this is because the northerners barely get to taste fruit. Besides that, the city is also one of the gateways to the central regions, and the young master reveals that this is why the place is so important to the northerners. After hearing this, a curious Vlad asks if that is the reason Sir Jaeger is taking action. In response, Joseph confirms this and reminds the kid that crisis is always an opportunity, especially when it's not their crisis. This so-called crisis is revealed to be the Heinel family succession dispute, and Joseph believes that an invitation from the legitimate heir which he received is basically a cry for help. After the young master breaks this down, Vlad is left dumbfounded for a bit, and then admits that he finds the world of nobles to be very complicated. Seeing the confusion and exhaustion on the kid's face, Joseph simply summarizes the entire journey and drama as a fight for the land of Damer in the end. Vlad finally understands this, and is quite baffled that this dispute is actually between family members, who are bound by blood for that matter. Once again, Joseph notices Vlad's reaction to this, so he explains to him that having feuds with those related by blood is a long-standing tradition of the nobility. The scene suddenly changes again, and we get to see the rightful heir to the Heinel family, who happens to be a young lady named Alicia. The uncle of this blue-haired girl in Heinel turns out to be one of her oppositions, as he claims that she was born out of illegitimate relations. Of course, this is a very convenient story to tell the people. After all, he would certainly become the next Baron Heinel if Alicia mysteriously disappeared for any reason. Alicia is the only child of the former Baron Heinel, but now that his throne is empty, her inherent limitations as a woman has weakened whatever right she had to succeed him. In the end, she had no choice but to prove her innocence through an honorable duel organized by the church. The young master reflects on Alicia's unfortunate story and thinks about how she could be a relative that is distant, but close and yet not too close at the same time. Joseph thinks back to his roots and admits that his maternal bloodline makes him no more than her 8th cousin. Regardless of how distant the relationship may seem, he's still certain that it's enough to establish some form of kinship between them. As such, Joseph believes that they can take the chance to make the Heinel family indebted to them, and as he reveals this, he informs Vlad that his father, the Count, is also fully in support of the plan. Hearing all of the complexities involved in noble family politics, Vlad is a bit overwhelmed, but he still acknowledges what an impressive plan it is. As the thought runs through his mind, he sees Sir Jaeger, who's riding a horse beside the cart, and confirms that the knight is certainly honored. Vlad doesn't seem to really see why Sir Jaeger is the one that the head of a family would invite to defend his honor. As our boy just thinks about that, Jaeger suddenly senses something off. He turns to look at the blonde kid through the window and asks him what that insolent look in his eyes is about. Vlad quickly denies doing anything wrong, but the advanced knight just seems to be looking for beef with the kid at this point. He expresses his annoyance that a lowly vassal like Vlad would dare to ride the carriage comfortably while the knight he's serving is riding a horse. Hearing this, our boy seems to be feeling embarrassed about it, so just admits that he has nothing to say for himself. The angry knight just responds, saying that he was finally ready to go around with pride when he heard that the blonde swordsman crushed the other vassals. But now, seeing that the kid can't even ride a horse, Jaeger is beyond disappointed, and he's furious because he feels that he's just been wasting his time teaching a moron. The advanced knight is so pissed off that he continues to lash out at the kid from the outside, and even when our boy moves away from the window, he can still hear the loud scolding. As ashamed as he probably is, he just consoles himself by saying that he'll probably be able to ride an expensive horse. However, Jaeger doesn't seem to think that argument even makes sense. He quickly stomps on that idea, claiming that he's the one who should even ride an expensive horse, because he's more of a noble than the kid from the back alleys. Jaeger screams this loud enough for it to sink into Vlad's head. But when he's done yelling, our boy suddenly starts to feel something strange happening to him. It's coming from inside his armor, and he wonders if something is wrong with him, because his heart has been beating like crazy over the last few days. The confused swordsman places his hand on his chest, and begins to wonder if it's a result of all the nagging. He quickly concludes that it wouldn't be much of a surprise if that's the case. In front of him, Sir Joseph won't stop talking, and to his side, Jaeger nags at him every chance he gets. However, as much as he would have preferred this first theory to be the real reason for the sudden sensation, he quickly finds out that it's actually an earthquake. Just then, the vibrations start to get even stronger, and the other knights outside confirm that the ground is rumbling. Jaeger realizes this as well, and when he notices the panic around him, he suddenly instructs everyone traveling to stop moving. He yells for them to get off their horses, and while they're struggling to do this with the powerful vibration, the force throws some of them off. Vlad quickly tells the young master to get out of the carriage before he can get hurt, and it's safe to say Joseph didn't expect that. After Vlad saves him, he casually tells the kid that his sincerity is admirable, but tells him not to panic too much. This just confuses our boy, but before he can dwell on it, the other knights sigh in relief, seeing that the powerful earth tremor has passed. Vlad is a bit excited, and reveals that this is the first time he's experiencing an earthquake, but that's when Joseph breaks it to him. The young master informs him that it wasn't an earthquake, and then urges him to look at the trail of damage left behind. Truly, it looks nothing like an earthquake, but appears to be some kind of giant mole at work. Although our guess was pretty close, Joseph reveals that it's actually a giant deathworm. He claims that the creature is a remnant of the fallen dragon, and our boy finds this news very intriguing. In fact, he's delighted to hear this, because a smile forms on his face as he admits that it sounds awesome to him. Soon, they arrive at the Heinel family's sole city, Damer, a very large settlement with huge fences and pillars keeping it separated from the outside world. When their carriage enters the city, they all get off at the Heinel estate, and that's when Sir Joseph tells Vlad that he's free to move as he likes henceforth. Hearing this, our boy is quite surprised that the young master wants to allow him to roam the city all by himself. After Vlad expresses his confusion, Sir Joseph simply tells him that he can take Goth along with him if he wants. But the main thing he hammers on is that he should travel as freely as he likes, and make sure that he sees as many things as possible. Even though the young master has already said this twice, the young swordsman is still extremely suspicious about the fact that they really said he can move freely. Bro is still not sure he can do that, and when Joseph sees his strange reaction, he asks if he's not satisfied with it. Without thinking twice, the blonde kid claims that he's very okay with it and would love to go sightseeing. But before he can even say anything else, the young master cuts him off. Joseph tells Vlad to think about why he brought him to the city with him, and reveals that an honorable duel is a rare event to see. It's even more special this time around because this honorable duel is a team event. Moreover, he explains that there are knights from a vast array of backgrounds in the city of Damer, and so he finally instructs the young swordsman to watch these knights closely and observe anything he can. Our boy is taken aback by this instruction, but Joseph has something special planned. He knows that seeing something even once can be more memorable than hearing it 10 times, so he's planning to foster the young knight in training properly with this method. Joseph honestly hopes that Vlad will be able to expand his world through various experiences, but Jaeger just tells our boy to avoid getting beat up in some random alley. The advanced knight also informs Vlad that they have to warm up and spar later in the evening. But while he's still talking, the young swordsman shows some attitude when he tries to make them know he's not stupid. Unfortunately, Jaeger doesn't rate him highly, and even admits that he's lost all faith in our boy, especially since he can't even ride a horse. Once again, a wave of shame washes over the blonde kid when he hears this same gist again, and after Jaeger is done mocking him again, Joseph tells him that he must report back every evening. Apart from that, he instructs him to tell him immediately about any unusual movements or behaviors he notices during their stay in the city. When the young master and the knight finally leave, Vlad finally soaks in the fact that he has some free time to himself after so long. So, he decides to have a look around the building, and quickly notices that it's smaller than the Bayezid mansion. The place also looks quite old to him, so he wonders if they even maintain it at all. The story about them being famous for their lemons starts to make less sense now, because it looks like they don't even have any money on hand. Just then, our boy suddenly grips his sword, and the moment he does, the voice starts talking again. It claims that it has been in the city of Damer before, and reveals that it remembers the tree on the hill which can be seen not too far away. A smile appears on Vlad's face when he sees the tree, and that's when he admits he'll need a place to pray after quite a long time. The scene changes, and we see the mysterious leafless tree standing quite tall in a graveyard. "I shall give you the sword and you shall give me the memories," is a quote that we see, and at the same time, someone we can't see yet reveals that it's time for him to give back since he's been taking for too long. Meanwhile, back inside the Heinel family mansion, Miss Alicia welcomes the visitors and thanks Joseph for coming all the way after receiving her invitation. The young master responds with a smile, claiming that of course, he must answer since it concerns the crisis of the rightful heir. He then reminds them that the call of blood is the most important after all. Joseph assures her that Count Bayezid has already allowed the visit and intervention. He informs her that the only thing that remains is her decision. In response, the young lady reveals that she has already made up her mind, and then tells him that everything will be done according to the Count's wishes. However, this is only if she comes out victorious in this honorable duel that will decide her fate in the future of the Heinel family. Hearing this, young Master Joseph assures Alicia that she has nothing to worry about, and then adds that this is because Bayezid's sword has always promised victory. After the bold declaration during the meeting in the dark room, Joseph and his men exit the place. On the way out, the other knight comments that they shouldn't take Alicia lightly, and Joseph admits that her temperament as a matriarch was very visible. He can see that she's properly holding herself together, and recalls how she kept the upper hand throughout their meeting. Regardless, Joseph confidently tells his men that their plan will remain the same. Looks like a team fight tournament is about to start soon, and it has Alicia's future on the line. I'm sure our hero will be made to participate one way or another, and I can't wait to see how he'll perform against some actual knights.